Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled Budgets Don't Work, Use Conscious Spending to Change Your Life. I'm Tammy West, Vice President, and I'll be today's moderator. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. We've taken a screenshot of an example of your attendee interface. You should see something like this on your own computer desktop in the upper right-hand corner. To expand or collapse your control panel, just click the orange arrow button. You're listening in using your computer speaker system by default today. If you would prefer to join over the phone, just select phone call in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed for you. All attendees are muted for today's webinar. For the handouts, just click the handouts arrow where you can view or download and save the documents from today's webinar. For any questions during the meeting, click the questions arrow and type your question inside the panel box. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We'll collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn the webinar over to your presenter, Robin Lind. Robin is the Credit Union's Education Coordinator and Manager of the Student Credit Union Program at Northwest and Coleraine High Schools. Robin, take it away.
Thanks, Tammy. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. As Tammy said, I'm Robin Lind from COPFCU, and I'm looking forward to sharing some great information with you today. You just heard from Tammy West, our Vice President, and also joining us today is Julie Klepak. Julie is our Business Development Representative, and you can follow up with her to arrange any financial education opportunities for yourself or for your workplace, or if you have any topics that you would like us to cover in future webinars. As Tammy mentioned, all of the listeners are on mute at this time to eliminate background noise, but I encourage you to ask questions through the chat window, and Tammy will be keeping an eye on that for me throughout the webinar. This webinar is based on the book I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. Last year, a local school district asked us to do a seminar series for their district employees, including one on budgeting. And let's face it, it's really hard to make budgeting interesting. It's a boring topic, and creating a budget is overwhelming and tedious. So I was thinking to myself, how could I possibly make this seminar interesting? And I discovered Ramit a while back, and I really liked his message, and I loved the idea of conscious spending and sort of changing your mindset about spending. So I got his book, and I thought it was perfect for that seminar, and I think it's perfect for this webinar. So I highly recommend this book. I Will Teach You to Be Rich. He's extremely readable. Ramit is very down to earth, and it's extremely readable, especially for a finance book. And he gives really good real life strategies and specific advice, especially for young people who are just starting out. And it talks about, investing and credit cards and credit card debt, paying off student loans. So it's obviously a lot more in depth than what I can talk about today. What I really like about it is the specific advice that he gives you. So he tells you which credit cards, which Roth IRAs you should open and where. So I highly recommend the book. I got it on Amazon, and I'm sure it's at all other booksellers. So let's start with a show of hands. You can raise your hand in the in your control panel. Who has tried to create a budget before? Maybe it was your New Year's resolution. Maybe it was your birthday and you decided I'm turning 30 and I should be a grown-up and have a budget. Or maybe you had a financial event or a financial situation that forced you to. Maybe you wanted to buy a house, or you got married or got a new job. Okay, great. So it looks like most of us have tried to create a budget at one time or another. And chances are you got frustrated pretty quickly, right? They're impossible to stick to. It's time consuming and it's tedious, and it makes you feel bad. So today we're going to forget everything we know about traditional budgeting and think about our spending in a new way. Everybody tells you how to save money, but nobody ever tells you how to spend it. So today we're going to learn how to be in charge of our own money and decide where we want it to go instead of wondering where it went. So we'll learn to create a conscious spending plan so we can learn to spend money on what matters to us And we'll make sure we're saving enough money and taking care of our responsibilities too, so we can free ourselves from guilt about spending on things that we love. So what is conscious spending? Conscious spending is about choosing the things you love enough to spend money on and then cutting costs mercilessly on the things you don't love. So, in truth, it's all about prioritizing. We would all love to have everything and be able to do everything, but in real life, we have to make some choices, and that's what conscious spending is. Traditional budgets are restrictive and they're tedious, and we feel like we can't spend money or do anything fun, so we tend to give up in a few weeks or months. So conscious spending, it's not about cutting spending on everything like most budgets are. It's about deciding what's important enough to spend on and what's not. So if you love lattes and you don't want to live without them, get them. And insert your passion here. Maybe it's shoes, maybe it's tools, maybe you're a crafter and you love to collect crafting supplies. We're going to learn how to work these things into our budget so we can spend our money on the things we want without the guilt. And why is this important? Why is conscious spending important? Well, it seems like every financial writer these days takes everything that you might buy and turns it into, if you had invested that $10 you spent on lunch today, you would have $40,000 right now, right? I'm sure we've all read these articles where they make you feel terrible about every penny you've spent. And it might be true that if we invested our $10 from lunch today, that it might be worth a lot more money 20 years down the road. But is that really how you want to live? Do you really want to think about every purchase that you've made, or what would have happened if you hadn't bought lunch today? At some point, you have to live and you have to have some fun. And conscious spending is about helping you make sure that you're taking care of everything so that you can enjoy the things you want without the guilt. So, your rich life, what does it look like? Let's take a minute to think about what your rich life would look like. And for some people, this can be hard, narrowing down and deciding exactly where to spend your money and what's most important to you. So maybe you want to be a millionaire or take nice vacations every year, or maybe you'd like to own a lake house or a vacation home. Maybe your parents are getting older and you want to make sure you have enough money to take care of them. Or maybe you're getting older and you want to make sure that you can leave money for your kids and for your grandchildren. Or maybe it's as simple as not wanting to worry about money anymore. So it's going to be different for everybody. Very few people decide how they want to spend their money up front. And then we wind up spending it on random things that aren't even important to us. And then it's gone and we're not even really sure what we did with it. So conscious spending is about deciding what's important enough to spend on and what's not. So we're going to think about this and type your answer in the question panel box. What does your rich life look like? If money weren't an issue, what would you do? What would you spend your money on? So think about this and, make a list of goals and things you really want to be able to spend your money on. It looks like I have some people saying that they want to take vacations. I have a couple all of the aboves. Not having to worry about money anymore. I think that's a big thing for everybody. Money can be very stressful. So to live your life and not have to worry about it, I think is a huge goal for a lot of people. So notice with this, thinking about your rich life, that we're focusing on what we do want to do. And that makes it a lot easier to say no to things we don't want to do down the line. And we'll talk about that a lot more later. And your rich life can change over time. As you achieve things or as your life changes, you might decide other things are more important. So maybe right now when you're making your list, you really want to stay in a hut over the water in Bora Bora, which is on my list. But maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, you've had kids and you've decided you'd rather take an RV trip to see all the national parks, or maybe you want to renovate your kitchen. So each year and as things change, your plan is going to evolve. So look at your list and decide if these are still your goals, and if you need to tweak your plan to make it happen. So your plan is going to evolve over time with you as your life changes. So what does conscious spending look like? Here we have an ideal starter conscious spending plan. This information is on handout number 1. So your money will be divided into 4 buckets. First will be your fixed costs. That should be about 50 to 60% of your monthly income. Next will be your investments. These are going to be your long-term, your long-haul investments, like your 401k, your Roth IRA, if you have a 403b, retirement accounts that you won't be using for 20 or 30 years or maybe even more. So you aim for about 10 to 15% of your income for that. Next will be your savings goals. These are going to be your shorter term goals of 3 to 5 years, maybe up to 10 year for bigger goals. So maybe a house down payment, maybe a vacation or a wedding, or your emergency fund. And then the rest is going to be your guilt-free spending, ideally about 15 to 20%. And what makes this guilt-free is that look at what you've done here. You've taken care of all of your obligations. You've paid your rent and your living expenses like your utilities. You've put money into your investments and contributed to your retirement. And you're saving for things that you want to do in the future and created an emergency fund to take care of all those inevitable things that happen. So everything that is left is yours to do whatever you want with. So here are our action steps for creating our conscious spending plan. Now, this is the hard part, the boring part that we dread when we think about budgeting, but there's really no way around this part. We have to know what our income and expenses are so we can create our plan. So first, we're going to calculate our income and expenses. Then we'll be able to create our conscious spending plan and decide what do we value and how can we make sure we're spending our money how we want to. Next, we'll learn how to optimize our spending and cut out the things that we don't care about. And finally, we'll learn how to automate our money so we don't have to think about it. We're going to set up a system so our money goes where it needs to go and it takes care of itself. Now, before we get started, I want to talk about what Ramit calls the 85% solution, which is that getting started is more important than getting it perfect. And I love this about Ramit. He's very realistic about things and about how people are. And what he means by that is 85% is better than 0% any day, right? So what he means is don't get hung up on these steps here and get frustrated and quit. You don't have to create a big, massive budgeting system right now. The key is right now to just get started. So today we'll create a simple version and then you can tweak it over time as you learn and you get better. And after a year or so of doing this, you're going to be really good at this and you'll have it pretty close to perfect. So if you only get it to 85% for now, that's better than nothing, right? I think these days we all have access to so much information, which is a great thing, but can really be a bad thing. For example, years ago, I was reading about Roth IRAs and how great they were. So I decided I wanted to open a Roth IRA. So I did what you do. I sat down at my computer and I Googled Roth IRAs and I opened 6 different tabs and I read the first article and it had great information and I'm ready to go. I read the second article. It also had great information. A lot of it said sort of a lot of different stuff than the first article said. And then I read the third article and the fourth article. And by the 6th article, I was so confused. And I had myself so confused that I wound up just shutting it down and deciding to do it another day. I think sometimes we can psych ourselves out and it leads to decision paralysis. So don't get too hung up on these steps here. Sometimes good enough is good enough. So all of this information on the next several slides is on handout number 2, and I've broken it down so we can talk about it in detail. So knowing how much you can spend starts with knowing how much you bring in. So first we're going to calculate our income. Aim for a 6-month average to account for all aspects of your income. First, you'll fill in your salary. If you have a spouse and they have a salary, fill that in too. Maybe you have some extra income. Maybe you're a teacher and you have a coaching or an advisor stipend, or maybe you have a summer job. Maybe you do side jobs. Maybe, you're an electrician or you're in IT and you do side jobs. Or maybe you refinish furniture or sell things on Etsy. So all of those are parts of your income. So you'll want to fill those in. And then don't forget about any child support or alimony that you might have. Next, we're going to calculate our expenses. If you have pulled up our worksheet, you'll see it has a lot of categories. These are just suggestions. Again, just fill in whatever you can to get started. So first, we have our fixed expenses. This should be about 50 to 60% of your income. And these are expenses you have to pay, like your rent or your mortgage, utilities, your cell phone, if you have student loans, daycare costs. And then next will be your variable expenses. These will be costs that you have more control over, like your groceries, your clothing and grooming, entertainment expenses. Now, with these, especially the variable expenses, being honest might be the hardest part as you're filling these in. It might be hard to go back and see what you've actually spent on certain things, but think about it this way. This is stuff you've already done. It's done and it's over and you can't change it. So now you're trying to learn from it, and you're trying to do better from now on and make sure that you're spending money on things that do matter to you. So while you're doing this, while you're calculating your expenses, limit this again to just the past 6 months. That should give you a pretty good picture of what you've spent. And to do this, you can use your credit card statements and your bank statements. And then going forward, I highly recommend using a budgeting app like You Need a Budget, or there's Mint or Clarity Money, or you can use a program like Quicken with your bank and credit card statements. And this can really help you going forward. What you'll do to get started is you can upload your credit card statement or your bank statements, and you'll categorize your spending at the beginning. So you'll have to tell it to begin with, Kroger is, groceries, or Target is, so-and-so. But once you get those things categorized, it'll learn to recognize it and it'll start categorizing things for you. And then by the end, you'll have a great spreadsheet that you can look at and you can see what you've spent on each category at any given time. So this will be a great start also if at some point you need to cut back on some areas. So maybe you've been at conscious spending or budgeting for a year or so and you notice, that your expenses are creeping up in one category or another. It'll be really easy once you get started with one of these programs to look back at your spreadsheet, see where your expenses are, and see, if you need to cut back in something, it'll be easy to see which categories have been creeping up and which ones you can cut back on. The next part of calculating your expenses are your investments and your savings goals. Your investments, again, these are your long-term goals, your retirement. So if you have an employer-sponsored 401k, obviously you want to make sure you contribute at least up to whatever amount they match, and then contribute to any other accounts as needed. How much you should contribute to your retirement depends on a lot of factors. Your age is obviously one of the biggest factors, but aim to save at least 10 to 15% in some combination of a 401k, a Roth IRA, or another retirement account. You'll see I have HSA on here. If you have access to an HSA, be sure you're contributing to it. If you're not familiar with HSAs, it's a health savings account, and they're basically an IRA for medical expenses. So you can make tax-deductible contributions to the plan, and withdrawals can be taken tax-free if they're used for approved healthcare expenses like your health insurance co-payments, medical expenses, prescription medications. So an HSA, you might have heard it called a triple tax threat, and that's because the contributions are tax-deductible, so they're pre-tax. Your investment earnings are tax-free, so any interest you earn on your HSA is also tax-free. And then the funds can be withdrawn tax-free as long as you're using them for medical purposes. So it's a great instrument for lowering your taxable income, and it's a great tool to prepare for both retirement and medical expenses that you'll probably have in the future, as well as any healthcare expenses that you may have right now. Next up are your savings goals. These are your short to midterm goals, 3 to 5 years, maybe up to 10. And the first one is your emergency fund. Most experts recommend, I'm sure you've heard, having 3 to 6 months of expenses saved for things like, medical bills. Maybe you have an illness or a natural disaster, maybe your basement floods. And if COVID has taught us anything, it's to be prepared for the unexpected. You never know if you or your spouse might lose your job or have your income reduced. So you need to make sure you are prepared. 3 months is great, 6 months is even better. Other savings goals you might have might be a house down payment on a house. Maybe you have a wedding. Maybe your child is getting married, or maybe you're getting married at some point. Any vacations that you would like to take, and then holiday gifts or birthday gifts. So for these expenses, you're going to total your expected costs for these and divide them over the amount of time you have. So let's say for your house down payment, the average house these days is $250,000. 20% of that is $50,000. And let's say you hope to buy that house in 5 years. To save $50,000 in 5 years, that's going to break down to $833 a month. The average wedding today is $35,000. So if you're doing that in 5 years, that would be $583 a month. So you'll just break down your expected costs for these and then divide them over how long you have. And notice time is on your side with these. So the longer you have to save for these, the better. So get started on saving for, major life events that you know are going to be coming up as soon as possible. Another key to having a plan you'll use is to account for the unexpected and to make sure you're building in some flexibility. So we all have irregular expenses, things that happen once a year, like your vehicle registrations or holiday gifts, or maybe only part of the year. Maybe your child is on a traveling soccer team and you have expenses related to that, hotels and tournament fees and equipment. So it's a good idea to plan for these expenses ahead too. So here's how we're going to handle these in our budget. For known irregular events, you'll track the expenses like your vehicle registration, your car insurance, your life and homeowners insurance. You'll calculate those for the year and again divide by 12, and you'll save that much money each month. And for the unknown irregular events, maybe car accidents, sports, car and home repairs, look at the past year and find these expenses and try to get a ballpark and total them up as best you can. And again, divide by 12 and save that much money each month. Some people save a flat 15% for the unexpected. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. That's a pretty good padding. And Ramit has a fun tip for these expenses. If you haven't used what you budgeted for these expenses by the end of the year, spend half on something fun and then save the rest of it for next year. So that really helps as a great incentive to save, and then you'll still be ahead next year. So we've calculated our income and we've taken out our expenses. What if you realize that you fall short and your income doesn't support everything you want to do? Well, first you're going to want to focus on some big wins. Typically, 80% of what you overspend is used toward only 20% of your expenditures. So focus on a few big problem areas instead of trying to cut out little things. Eliminating Starbucks, cutting junk food from your grocery bill, those are small wins. And then it's those small wins that make your budget feel too restrictive and make you feel more likely to quit. So instead, make sure you focus on things that really matter. So to do that, we're going to find some habits that we can cut back on that aren't important to us, and we'll optimize our spending. And we're going to discuss each of these on the next few slides. So we'll learn how to cut back on expenses we don't care about, and how to renegotiate our credit card interest rate. We'll talk about rethinking your subscriptions and lowering your insurance costs. And then finally, we'll talk about ways to get some freelance work or some extra income. Now, one thing to note before we move forward, if you carry a credit card balance, a huge win could be to eliminate your credit card debt and getting rid of your credit card payment. That obviously could be a huge win for many people, but that's obviously is too big of a topic for us to tackle within this webinar. So we're actually going to focus on eliminating debt in our next webinar, which is called Fear No More, Eliminating Debt, and that one will be on October 22nd, and I'll give you some more information about that later in the webinar. And then one other thing I want to talk about before we move on is as we're talking about cutting things out of our budget, make sure that you're making bite-sized changes. So it's sort of like a diet. If you decide to go keto or paleo, those are really restrictive diets, and you keep having to say no to things, and you have to cut so much out, and it doesn't feel good. And that's when you feel frustrated and you wind up quitting. Huge immediate change just usually isn't sustainable. You aren't going to decide that you're going to run a marathon and go out and start running 10 miles every day. You'll want to start with a mile. So we're looking for long-term sustainable spending changes that we can stick to and make them a habit over time. So our first option to cut our expenses is the envelope system. I'm sure you've all heard of the Dave Ramsey envelope system, where you budget a certain amount of money for things, and when the money is gone, it's gone. So this is a great way to pare down your spending on things like shopping or dining out or maybe on hobbies. So you budget what you want to spend on certain categories, and then at the end of the month, that's all you get. So for this, you could use actual envelopes, or you could have a checking account with a debit card only for these expenses, or maybe you have a specific credit card. Now, keep in mind, this is not an envelope system for all of your expenses. That gets way too tedious. So just choose a few key areas where you want to cut back. So maybe dining out, maybe shopping, maybe your grocery budget is kind of out of control. But the key with this is to make small bite-sized changes that will become a habit. So notice on this chart, we didn't go straight to $250. We started at 500 and then we cut it back over 6 months to get down to 250. So maybe you start with packing your lunch a few days a week, or ordering pizza on Fridays instead of going out, and then making other sustainable cuts as you go along. Our next option for a big win if you carry credit card debt is to negotiate your credit card interest rate. In 2019, the average interest rate on credit cards was around 17%, and it could be as high as 23 to 24% for people who don't have good credit. So negotiating your interest rate could be a huge win in reducing your payment and how much you owe overall. So to negotiate, you're going to start with your oldest card, one that you have a history with, and hopefully have a good payment record. Next, you'll want to know your current terms. What is your current interest rate, your current balance on the card? How much interest have you paid over the past year? And then next, you're going to do your research. Look for competing card offers. If you find a similar card with a better rate, make note of what the card name is, the company, and the terms. And this will help you know what you want to ask for. And next, you'll want to know your credit score. If it's good, you can definitely use it as leverage, along with if you have a good payment history with them. They're a lot more willing to lower your rate if you have a good track record. So once you have all of this information, you're going to call the number on the back of the card and you'll make your case. It's a good idea to have a script ready, or at least some talking points, just to make sure that you stay on track. And you'll just say, hi, this is so-and-so. I've been a customer for X amount of years and I have a good payment history. And I'd like to lower my interest rate to 10% or 12%. Have a number in mind. And this is a good time to mention if you received a credit card offer in the mail for X credit card for X interest rate and you'd like for them to match it. And make sure, as you call the companies, make sure you're keeping a record of who you talked to and what was said. Nothing is more intimidating if you have to call back than having an exact record of exactly what was said and who you spoke with. It's a great talking point when you have to call back. So you've made your case. What if they say no? Well, first, calmly ask why and listen to what they have to say. These are things that you can work on to make your standing better with the company. Next, you could ask for a temporary reduction, maybe 6 months to a year if you have a financial situation going on. Maybe you've had a job loss or a medical issue, or you've had a baby. Those kind of things. A lot of companies will work with you on situations like that, so they might be willing to give you a temporary reduction. You can also take 6 months to a year to improve your standing with the company. Make sure you're making your payments on time. Try to reduce your balance. Your utilization rate is actually a huge part of your credit score. It's 30%. And what that means is you have a credit limit on every one of your credit cards. And let's say your credit limit is $5,000. If you have a $5,000 balance on that card, you're at 100% utilization rate. What creditors like to see is that you have $5,000 available to you, but you have enough self-control to only charge half of that. So rule of thumb is 30% and no more than 30 or 50% of your credit limit. So take some time to reduce your balance. Pay more than the minimum payment. And all of these things will improve your credit score and your standing with the card company. And then try again in 6 months to a year. Give them a call back and state your case again. And then make sure any savings you get with these reductions, make sure you're applying them to pay off the card. Next, rethink your subscriptions. I'm sure most of you are surprised to see that the average person spends $237 a month on subscriptions, which is an average of almost $3,000 a year. But think about all the subscriptions you might have. They can really add up. Maybe you have gym memberships or Netflix, Hulu, music streaming, most of us have, some sort of cable or satellite TV. Maybe you have meal services. I think it's easy for these to add up, and sometimes you forget about them and you wind up not even using them. So this is something I did actually a few years ago, and I was shocked, just as probably a lot of you will be when I went through them. I found that we had Spotify because my daughter had an Android phone, but she had switched back to an iPhone, but we were still paying for Spotify. Um, we also had Amazon Prime Music for Alexa and Apple Music for the family. So I was able to cancel Spotify, which we weren't using, and that was $14 a month. And then we also had HBO Now for a show that we had been watching, and we finished it a while back, and I had totally forgotten about it, and we were still paying, again, $14 a month. So right there, I'm pretty close to $30 a month that I cut for things that we weren't even using. Maybe you have an Audible subscription. The Cincinnati Public Library has great audio streaming options. They have an app called Libby. They have an app called Overdrive. So maybe your Audible subscription is something that you could live without. Maybe you have app subscriptions that you're no longer using. Your cable or satellite, those are one of the easiest to negotiate. Or, cut out channels and move to a different package that's a little bit less expensive. Studies show that most people dramatically overestimate how much value they get from their subscriptions. For example, the gym. Most people go to the gym on an average of 4.3 times a month. So divide your cost per month that you're paying for your gym by the number of times you work out, and figure out what is your cost per visit. Is this worth it to you? Or does your gym offer pay-as-you-go passes that might be a little bit cheaper? Or maybe you can work out at home. I think there are very few silver linings with the COVID, but one of them I think has been just the explosion of workout at home options. There are thousands and thousands of videos on YouTube, anything from kettlebell and yoga to Pilates and dance videos. So the options there are almost limitless. So do you want to belong to the gym? Do you need to? Maybe you have both Netflix and Hulu. Do you need both of them? Or could you go a la carte with one of them and just buy shows as you watch them and, just see what you spent at the end of the month? Now, this isn't about depriving yourself. All these subscriptions, maybe you love your Birchbox and that's like your happy time of the month, to get that in the mail. That's totally fine. What I'm talking about is, look through your subscriptions, make sure you're using them all, and maybe try cutting some of them for a few months. And if you miss them, you can always resubscribe. But with any luck, you'll find that you were spending money on things you really don't want or you aren't using anymore, and you can put that money elsewhere, to spend it more consciously. Um, Other solutions. Another big one could be to lower your insurance costs. You should really reevaluate your insurance every few years. Either call your insurance provider and see if you can get a better rate, or shop around for price quotes, for other companies. If your car has gotten older, ask for a higher deductible or reduce your coverage. And if your homeowners or your life and your car insurance aren't all from the same provider, see if it'll make a difference if you have them all in the same place. Now, you might be surprised to see this one here, improve your credit score. But most insurance in Ohio is one of the states where it's legal to do this. Insurance companies can use your credit score and factors like your payment history and your total debt to assess your risk level. And the reason for that is research shows that your credit score can accurately predict your accident potential. So statistical analysis shows that people who have a lower credit score are more likely to file a claim, and people with a higher credit score tend to get into fewer accidents, and they cost insurance companies less overall than people with lower credit scores. The Federal Trade Commission did an independent study, and they found that it was true that credit scores are effective predictors of risk. So if your credit score has improved since you got your insurance, call them and see if you can renegotiate your rate. And finally, there's a limit to how much you can cut from your budget, but there's really no limit to how much you can earn. So you could always find some ways to add to your income, if only temporarily. So maybe you couldn't do Uber driving, or lately Uber Eats and Grubhub have exploded again over the past few months. You could deliver groceries. We all have talents that we could use. Maybe you're a teacher and you could tutor or do some student enrichment. You could sell some unused items, maybe on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace. Maybe you have an unused treadmill or bike. Seasonal jobs are going to be coming up, so that would be a great way to add to your income. Or, I think the other thing that we've learned with COVID is we can pretty much work from anywhere. And again, we all have talents that we can offer. So, maybe you could be a virtual assistant or something. So look for job listings on Craigslist or LinkedIn for things that you could do to add to your income. Um, But again, make sure you're being realistic with this. Make sure you're making bite-sized changes that are sustainable and from areas that matter and make a big impact, and you aren't going to alter your entire life for this. It's just small changes over time. So some of these are going to be pretty easy to do in these times. Maybe you're spending a lot less on entertainment, and you're not working in the office and the kids aren't going to school, so you don't have to spend so much on clothing. If that's the case, make sure that that money isn't getting lost. If you're spending a lot less money in one area, make sure you reallocate it somewhere so it doesn't get lost. So direct it to paying off your credit card debt or building up your emergency fund. Okay, so now we're going to set up our automatic money flow. So now that we have everything figured out, all of our income and our expenses, we're going to make it automatic so you don't even have to think about it anymore. So kind of like how you contribute to your 401k every month before you even see your paycheck, we want to do this with all of our money. We're going to create an automatic flow where everything just happens and you don't even have to think about it. So again, the less you have to think about it, you're spending your time doing things you would rather do. So our first step to this is going to be connecting all of our accounts so that we can easily send our money where it needs to go, either from account to account or from accounts to bills. So your paycheck is going to fund your retirement savings, your HSA account if you have one, and then your checking account. So all of your money will land in your checking account first. Then from your checking account, you're going to send the money everywhere else it needs to go. So first would be any other retirement plans you have, if you have a Roth IRA or something like that. Also your short-term savings account for your emergency savings and all the things that you want to do. Then your checking account will also pay for your fixed costs that don't allow credit card payment. Maybe your rent or your mortgage, you can't put that on a credit card. Your checking account will also pay your credit card bill and any occasional spending cash. And then you'll see that your credit card pays for all of your fixed costs and your guilt-free spending. So obviously this model heavily relies on your credit card to pay most of your payment. And that's because Ramit uses his credit card to pay all the bills that he can with his credit card so that he can get the rewards points and for ease of tracking. So any bill he can pay with his credit card, he does. So in this model, you'll see the checking account pays for the credit card bills and fixed costs that don't allow credit card payment, but the credit card pays for everything else. Now, obviously, this is up to you. If you're not a credit card person, obviously you can skip this and just pay everything from your checking account. Obviously, this is something Dave Ramsey would be very against. He's not a fan of credit cards, I think, as we all know, and especially credit card rewards. He actually said, I never met a millionaire who said that they made all of their money with airline miles. So this is up to you. You could either link all of your bills to your credit card, or you can just link them to your checking account. So now that we have all of our accounts linked, it'll be easy to transfer money back and forth and set up your automatic money flow so you can automatically pay all of your bills. So depending on how you want to pay your bills, you might want to get them to all be due on the same day. This is the easiest way to simplify the process and get a good money flow. So most places will work with you on this. All you have to do is give them a call and tell them that your payment is currently due on X day, maybe the 15th, and you would rather it be due on the 1st. And it might take a month or so, to get onto that billing cycle, but most places will work with you on that. So your first step in your automatic money flow is going to be setting up auto pay for all of your bills. So you'll sit down with all of your bills and you'll set up each one to auto pay. So you'll either link it with your checking account or you'll link it to your credit card. If you're using your checking account, you'll need your bank routing number and your account number. And if you're using your credit card, obviously you'll need your credit card number. Now, the importance of setting up auto pay is because it helps you make sure that your bills are always paid in full on time and you don't get any late fees. I think we've all experienced, that we forgot a bill or two, over the years. And even one missed payment can result in a late fee. And if it's on your credit card, it can raise your interest rate. And they can, raise your interest rate and they don't have to lower it, I think, until a year. So this can make a big difference. So make sure that you set up the statements to come to your email so that you can check them over. And you might be wondering, what about errors? If I set everything to auto pay, what if a bill is wrong and here I've paid for it and, and it's wrong and I shouldn't have to pay that much? Well, a couple of things with this. First of all, I've been looking over my bills for a long time and they're rarely wrong, as much as sometimes I hope they are. So generally I think bills are error-free. Ramit values his time over any errors that might happen from time to time. He figures, he might overpay on something, but he's not paying a late fee, or racking up any kind of a higher interest rate. But he probably has more money than we do. So I would recommend getting all of your bills sent to you and check the bill each month, but have it set to auto pay in case you don't get to it. You can always dispute errors after it's been paid if you need to, but at least you won't have a late fee and it's been paid in full. So the key is that you're spending less and less time on managing your money and setting it up so that it manages itself. So one note, when you first start with your automatic money flow, make sure you have some padding in your account in case something happens. Maybe a transfer is late or you have forgotten about a bill that was supposed to come out. So make sure you have, an extra $500 to $1,000 in your account to make sure that you don't overdraft your account while you're getting this set up. So this automatic money flow is assuming that you get paid once a month and you get paid at the first of the month. And we'll talk about if you have different pay scenarios in a minute. So on the first of the month, your paycheck is going to hit your checking account. Your 401k contribution will have already come out of it by then. And also if you have an HSA, that will have come out. So the rest of that money is yours and it's in your checking account. So about the 5th of the month, you're going to set up an automatic transfer to your savings accounts. So this will be your investments, like your any Roth IRA, your 403b, and then also your short-term savings accounts for your short-term goals. And you're going to do this on the 5th of the month to make sure that the money has safely arrived in your account. So maybe the first of the month winds up being on a Sunday or a holiday or something got screwed up. You want to make sure you give yourself a couple days of padding before you send the money out of there. And then on the 7th of the month, you're going to schedule the automatic payment of all of your bills. So again, for the first few months, keep an eye on your account and make sure that you have enough money in your account. Most of your bills are going to be roughly the same each month, but until you get used to your money flow, make sure you check to make sure it's all flowing correctly and the transfers are going where they're supposed to be going and you have enough money in your account. As you go along, you're going to need to check this less and less as you get your system in place. So what if you get paid twice a month? Well, your system is going to be similar, but you'll pay your bills on the first half of the month. So again, maybe your first paycheck comes in on the 1st of the month. You will schedule all of your bills to pay either on the 5th or the 7th of the month, whichever one you choose. And then on the second pay, maybe you get paid on the 15th, that's when all of your savings and investments are going to come out of your checking. So your money will go in first, you'll pay your bills on the 5th or the 7th, and then you'll pay for you'll fund your savings accounts on your second pay. If you're freelance or you have a seasonal job where you maybe make more money in the summer than the winter, You'll have, again, a similar system where your payments are set up on the same dates, but on your good months, you're going to make sure that you have an extra fund, an extra savings account to pay for expenses during your down months. So if you have a seasonal job, you'll probably want to keep a little bit more padding in your checking account to make sure that you don't overdraft. And you'll probably want to make sure that you check your balances a little bit more regularly. But when you have a good month, you'll make sure you save enough for when your slower months, you can send that money over and pay for your expenses. And then our last step is going to be to review and track our plan monthly. This might sound odd, but this is really actually the fun part for me. And I think once you get budgeting, it gets a lot easier and you can tweak it. And I think you'll probably enjoy this part too. So personally, I do a quick check usually on Tuesdays. That way, everything I've done over the weekend has probably cleared. And I just do a quick, run through of my credit card, my bank account, just to make sure nothing crazy happened, no fraudulent charges, no double charges. And then anytime we have a change in our money, I make sure that everything is accounted for. So let's say you have a home equity loan and you finally pay it off, or your car is paid off. Make sure that money isn't getting lost. It's sort of like a zero-based budget that you might have heard of, where you want to make sure that you're accounting for every dollar you have. So every dollar in your budget has a job, and if it's no longer doing that job, say paying your car payment, you need to give it another job. Maybe you're paying off your credit card debt with it. Maybe you start a savings account and you save for a down payment for a new car, or building your emergency fund. So as you pay things off, or if you get a raise, or if you have a windfall, make sure you sign every dollar to some purpose. Otherwise, it might get wasted on something you don't even want. So over time, this is going to become more and more automatic, and it's going to require less and less of your time. So that is the end of our presentation. I hope this was good information for you and you learned something today. I hope your takeaway is to just get started. I love Ramit's 85% solution where, getting started is the hardest part. And once you get started, it gets easier and easier and you learn more and more and you get better and better. And I hope it also helped you change your mindset about how you want to spend your money. Knowing what you value and where you do want to spend your money makes it a lot easier to say no to things without feeling deprived. And it makes it a lot easier to say yes to things without feeling guilty too. I think we all know people who are too frugal and they don't want to spend money on anything. And we all work hard and we should be able to enjoy our money the way we want to. And to do that, we need to make sure that our money is working for us too. So creating a conscious spending plan is a great way to start, for us to make sure that we're making choices. We might say no to something now so that we can say yes to something later. And it makes the no's a lot easier. So I'll open it up to any questions that you have. You can type any questions that you have in the question pane. And I'll leave it to Tammy to let me know if anybody has any questions.
Right now, we don't have any questions, but just a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, expand out your attendee panel by clicking that orange arrow, and then click the little arrow next to the questions area, and then just type your question in. So I think we'll wait a couple of seconds to see if we have any questions coming in. So far, so good. I don't see any other questions coming in.
Well, and I will have my contact information. In the end, I have a few housekeeping items to take care of. And if anybody has any questions, I will have my email address, my phone number up in just a minute. And you can feel free to contact me privately if you have any questions.
Yes, if you have any more questions to submit, Robin, do you want to go ahead and move forward with the information about the upcoming webinar, and we'll see if any other questions come in before we end.
Yes, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have another webinar coming up. It's on October 20th, and it's called Fear No More, Tackle Your Debt. And here we'll talk a lot more about strategies to eliminate your debt, like credit card debt. So I hope you can join us for that one as well. You can register at copfcu.com/webinars. And if you're in college or you have a student coming close to being in college, we do have a couple other webinars coming up. One is called It's FAFSA Time. That's going to be on Wednesday, September 30th. That one is a national webinar, and it's either at 1 or 6 o'clock. This one's on September 30th, which is one day before the FAFSA opens on October 1st. So it should give some great information to get you ready for that. And then our next one is College Planning 101, How to Prepare, Pay, and Stay in College. And that one will be Tuesday, October 6th at noon. Also, this webinar has been recorded, so you should receive an email with a recording in a few hours. And you can also access it anytime and all of our webinars on our website at copfcu.com/webinars. Tammy, did any questions come in?
We do. We did get a question, and this comes from Sharon. She actually says, thank you for your time today. I am retired and find this very close to my own budgeting. And then she asked, will we get an email about the next session?
Yes, you will be getting an email about the next session. And again, it's always on our website at copfcu.com/webinars. But yes, you will be getting a notification about our next webinars. And to Sharon's point, actually this book is a great gift. As soon as my daughter's boyfriend graduated college, I got him a copy of this book. I think, time is on your side with all of this. So it makes a great wedding gift. Probably not anything anybody's excited about, but I think as they read it, they'll find that it's great information. So I thank you all for joining us today. Again, if you have any questions, my contact information is here on the screen, rlind@copfcu.com, or you can call me directly. My extension is 55, and I'd be happy to talk one-on-one with you. If you have any suggestions for any webinar topics that you would find useful, please let any of us know, Julie, Tammy, or I. Or if you would like a financial curriculum for your workplace, please contact Julie about that. Tammy, did you have anything more you wanted to add?
Actually, we do have one more question, and that comes from Janet, and she says, she asked, what is the name of the book again?
Let me get back to that slide real quick. It's called I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and it's by Ramit Sethi. Should be that one, yes. So it's Ramit Sethi, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. It's not very long. I think it was $10 on Amazon, and it's a fantastic book. Again, it's very readable, especially for a financial book. He's very down to earth, so I highly recommend it.
And I think that's it for questions for today.
All right, great. Well, I thank you all for joining us, and I hope this helped, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.